What's happening? It's Coach Brandon, and inside of this video, I'm going to be explaining my exact process that I used on myself and that I put my clients through to stick to a diet that works for losing body fat, for building muscle, for getting ripped, and staying as ripped as possible easy, right? So diet adherence, because if you don't stick to your diet, you're either not going to get the results at all, or the results are going to be temporary, right? So I'm not going to be talking about like specific diet approaches like, keto, low carb, high carb, low fat, paleo, carnivore, crap like that. Instead, I'm going to be talking about like the logistics around how you approach following your diet, right? So when it comes to the overall structure of your diet, there's really two main ways that you can approach the structure of following your diet, right? So number one, you can take like a more rigid, structured approach, which would be like following a meal plan, right? Some people call it like clean eating, but like following a meal plan and basically eating like the same thing every single day, or maybe having like a few meal plan options, right? So that's the first way you can approach it. The second way that you can approach it is by flexible dieting. Some people call this if it fits your macros. So basically, just having like a calorie target and macronutrient targets and eating whatever you want, but counting your calories and macros and making sure that you're hitting your calorie and macronutrient targets on a daily basis, right? So, which of these two approaches is best? Okay, well, let's take a look at each and weigh the pros and the cons. Okay, so when it comes to having a meal plan, eating strictly, rigidly, clean eating, that kind of thing, there's actually a lot of pros to following a diet like this. So the pros are, number one, this is probably the biggest one. There's no guesswork or trial and error involved if you have a structured meal plan, right? Because a meal plan has all your decisions made for you. It tells you exactly what you need to eat, exactly how much of it you need to eat. It should give you a good idea of like what times you should eat at. So it should give you some structure around the timing that you eat. And so all of this makes it extremely easy to follow, right? It saves you a ton of time. It saves you a ton of decision fatigue. You don't have to make decisions, right? You just buy the food, you cook the food, you eat it, and that's it, right? So that's the first pro. The second pro is that this kind of relates to the first one. Meal plans force you to develop new habits very quickly, right? So because it's really easy to follow, there's no guesswork, there's no trial and error, and you have everything pre-planned out, it's easy to stick to your routine from the very moment that you start it. And then the longer that you just stick to it, the sooner and the faster that you're going to develop the habit of eating whatever way that meal plan forces you to eat, right? And then lastly, meal plans are proven to be very, very effective, right? So there's a ton of research on comparing like just simple like nutrition counseling to having like fat loss, diabetes patients, that kind of thing. So counseling, basically like nutrition education versus, so that I think that's called standard diet care in the medical world, versus giving these patients meal plans, and meal plans always work way better in the research. Okay, so those are all the pros to following a meal plan, like taking a more rigid, structured approach to dieting. The cons are they're pretty obvious, right? Most people will attack, or most people's argument against more of like a rigid meal plan approach is it's not flexible enough, right? And a lot of people will say it gives you a bad relationship with food, which it doesn't. We'll talk more about that in a second. But that is one of the cons for sure. Like meal plans are rigid, so eventually you're going to get tired of eating sort of like in a way that's structured, eating the same thing every single day, that kind of thing, right? Eventually you're going to get tired of it. You're going to crave some nuance. And then the second con is meal plans don't really teach you a whole lot about food because you don't really need to pay attention to what's in the food you're eating, right? You just follow the plan blindly. And because you're following it kind of blindly and you're assuming that this works because it works, you don't really learn a whole lot about food, right? Okay, so those are the pros and cons of following a meal plan, clean eating, rigid dieting, whatever you want to call it, right? So now let's take a look at flexible dieting. Okay, so the pros of flexible dieting is you can virtually eat whatever you want when you're flexible dieting, right? So flexible dieting, it's all about your total daily calorie intake, your total daily macronutrient intake, right? So those are really the two most important factors when it comes to dieting for fat loss, for muscle gain, for health, whatever it is, right? It all comes down to energy balance, calories in, calories out, and then the macronutrient composition of the way that you're eating, right? Those are the most important factors. So as long as you are consistently hitting those, your daily calorie and macronutrient targets, more or less, you're going to get results no matter what foods you're eating, right? So I know for a lot of people who are newer to nutrition and like understanding this stuff, that seems very far-fetched that you can eat like whatever you want, whatever junk you want, and as long as you eat less than you burn and your macronutrient composition is decent, that's healthy. But it's the truth, right? Now, if you're eating a ton of junk all day, what's going to happen, and the reason that it's unhealthy, what's going to happen is because it's going to make it really hard for you to stick to the calorie and macronutrient targets that you have, right? Because food that is unhealthy is usually very calorie dense, low volume. It doesn't keep you very satisfied. High salt, fat, carb intake, the combination of all three of those things, sugar as well. It makes it so you eat more, right? That's what most processed food is specifically designed to make you do, is eat more, right? And get addicted. Okay. So anyway, that's the first pro of flexible dieting. You can virtually eat whatever you want. The second pro is you learn a ton about food, right? Because you need to make sure, you need to be constantly making sure that the foods that you choose to eat are going to fit into your calories and your macronutrients. That forces you to be more conscious of what's in all the food that you're eating, and it teaches you a lot about food. Okay. The second pro, or the third pro, is that you're not restricted to eating at like specific times or anything like that. So it doesn't really feel like there's much structure, although the more structure that you implement when you're flexible dieting, the better. And then the last pro, and this is kind of like a summary of all the pros, when you flexible diet successfully, it really doesn't feel that much like you're on a diet at all, right? So when you learn how to flexible diet and you get confident with it, it causes like this paradigm shift where you realize just how easy dieting to stay in amazing shape can be. And it helps you understand how food really works, and it helps you develop an extremely healthy relationship to food. It makes it really easy to adopt like a lifelong healthy lifestyle, and again, relationship with food, right? So those are the pros and cons of both following like a more rigid meal plan, clean eating approach versus flexible dieting if it fits your macros, whatever you want to call it, right? So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's best to use both, right? So the mindset that you need to have around dieting is that there's really no such thing as being on a diet, right? If you eat food, you are on a diet, right? So you can't really be like on or off a diet. You're either conscious about your eating choices or you're unconscious about your eating choices, right? People who are unconscious usually end up obese, overweight, sick, that kind of thing, right? People who are conscious of their diet, who would tell you that, yeah, I am on a diet, I follow a specific way of eating, those people are healthier, in shape. Those are the guys who have abs, who are lean and muscular, who you look at in the gym and wonder what they're doing with their training. You should be wondering what they're doing with their diet, right? So it all comes down to education, right? People who look at dieting versus people who look at dieting as something that is like negative just have the wrong mindset around restriction, right? Because that's basically what dieting is at the end of the day. It's restriction. Now, the way that you look at that restriction is what's going to determine your relationship with food, right? So basically, the wrong mindset around dieting and consciously making healthy choices and choices that are going to help you, manipulate your body composition to look better, leaner, more muscular. So the wrong mindset is like looking at food as either good or bad, right? So chocolate is bad, therefore I can never eat it. That's the wrong mindset. The right mindset is chocolate is really high in calories due to its high carb, fat, sugar intake. It's very calorie dense. And if I eat it, that's going to put a big dent in my total daily calorie allotment. And it's not going to make me feel very full. It's not going to be very satisfying, right? So that's just the difference here is one person is educated, one person is not well educated, right? They just think this food is bad, whereas the other person knows exactly why it's bad. So food restriction, the way you need to look at it is it serves a purpose, right? For a very specific reason, okay? So anyway, so what is the best approach overall to dieting? So in my opinion, and this is how I learned to become very, very consistent with the way that I eat. I'm eating exactly the way I need to stay and continue to get into better shape year round all the time. And it's really easy. And this is also what I put my clients through to help them better adhere to a better diet. So I call it the perfect diet formula. Basically, it's 3 steps. All right. So number 1 is you should start with a meal plan. Okay. So if you are trying to change your eating habits, it's the best way to do it quickly, right? Like I mentioned earlier, it's the best way to change your eating behavior fast right out of the gate. Okay, so a solid meal plan should outline exactly what foods you need to eat, exactly how much of them you need to eat. The more accurately you measure those, the better, right? So I try to measure everything that I can with a scale, otherwise with measuring cups, that kind of thing, right? There should be some sort of meal structure. So exactly what time you eat per day doesn't matter that much at all. If at all, it doesn't really matter at all. But there should be some structure of like, here's when I have this meal, here's when I have this meal, this is the combination of foods that I'm gonna have in that meal. And then you should also break down the calorie and macro content of each food item and each meal, and then your daily total, okay? And then when you follow the meal plan, you should aim for 100% adherence. You should meal prep everything. You should do everything. I like to meal prep 2 days a week when I do follow a meal plan. That makes it the easiest to follow because you're not thinking about it as much. You don't want to be thinking about what you're eating throughout the day. You want everything to be pre-decided as soon as possible out, and that's gonna give you the best chance of success. Okay. Now, like I mentioned, the cons of a meal plan is you don't learn a whole lot about food. And eventually you're going to get sick of the structure of eating more or less the same thing every day. So the second step to the perfect diet formula is slowly turning that meal plan into a flexible meal plan. Okay, so you're going to want to use a food tracking app like MyFitnessPal, which is like the most universal one. That's the one I use. That's the one I get my clients using. And what you want to do is take that meal plan and transfer it into the food tracking app that you're using. And then you can start swapping things out like one thing at a time, right? It helps to have a list of different protein, carb, and fat sources, healthy ones preferably. So you know, like, okay, so if I remove this food, that reduces my carbs. So now I have to replace it with this food, et cetera, okay? The third step is you can get completely flexible. So once you get comfortable with swapping like one thing out at a time, you can totally change your diet and like you can change every food that's on there, right? Or you can change the amount of meals that you have per day. You can fast if you want. You can make room to have cheat meals, that kind of thing, right? So it'll take a little bit of time, but it's well worth it because when done right, when you get to this point, you'll never feel like you're on a diet, even though you're always eating to get and stay in the best shape of your life, right? It takes 5 minutes max per day. Like you can copy and paste things basically. It's very simple. And once you get to this point, you're really kind of free from struggling with your diet, with your nutrition, right? You're going to be well educated and you're going to know how to diet sustainably, right? Okay, so all that being said, I think we're going to leave the video at that. So if you want to work with me to implement the perfect diet formula, so you want to have me supervise you through it, coach you, do weekly check-ins, and have access to me 24/7, as well as with your training, etc., then check out the links below. You can also join my Facebook group. I have a ton more free content in there. I go live weekly in there. So if you're interested in working with me personally, one-on-one, check out the links in the description below. Also, make sure to subscribe to my channel if you're not already. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of my future videos. And I'll smash the like button and leave a comment. Let me know what you thought. Let me know if there's anything that you would like to see in future videos. And at that, we'll see you on the next one.